Today we're going to talk about how to use the Akai MPK Mini IV in a completely standalone setup controlling external gear. Perfect for DAWless and hardware setups. Let's get into it. The first thing we need to do is power the MPK Mini, which we can do via the USB-C port. You can use one of these portable power bricks. I've got one with built-in USB that I can just connect to the back of the MPK, and now we are powered on. Next, since the MPK Mini has a full-size 5-pin MIDI jack, I've got my MIDI cable, which I'll connect to the back. And my synth here, the Micro Monster 2, this has a 3.5mm MIDI TRS jack, so I'll need a converter. This synth also requires USB power, and then I will also run audio out from the synth. Now, I was pretty quickly able to just start controlling the synth, but before we get too deep, let's check in on a couple settings. First of all, the two main modes of the MPK Mini, plug-in mode and DAW mode, are not the modes we want to use if we're going to be controlling an external synth standalone. I'm instead going to use user presets. So if I hold Shift and tap the user presets button, we can actually use the center encoder to change between presets. We have the DAW and plugin modes, but then we also have a number of user presets. So we can just enter into any user preset mode. Here I'm in user preset 3. Now I'm in a new mode that is not optimized for a plugin or DAW control, but it does give us the flexibility to map the pads, the knobs, change MIDI channels, and create custom mappings for this particular synth. And there's two ways we adjust those parameters. First of all, if we hold Shift and go into the global settings, we can change the MIDI channel for the keys, which is currently set to MIDI channel 1. Now, I can already hear MIDI channel 1 is controlling one of the synth sounds on the Micro Monster 2, but I might want to use the pads to control the second sound on the Micro Monster. So I'm going to scroll down and go to pad channel, which is defaulted to channel 10, and I'm going to set this to channel 2. So now we have sound 1, which is the synth keys sound, and sound 2, which is this bass kind of sound, MIDI channel 2, which is the second sound on our Micro Monster. So those were just two settings from the global settings, but now I want to change more things. So I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to go into Program Edit mode. And on the screen here, it says Move a Control to Edit. So I could tap any of these pads actually, and I could change what MIDI channel they're sending on, which they're all set to channel 2 because we just made that change, but I can also change things like the particular note that they send. Program change or PC, control change, which is MIDI CC, and off and on values as well. So you have full customization of the pads as well as the knobs. So each one of these knobs has an associated CC number, low and high value, and a mode, absolute or relative. Absolute mode means you'll have to turn the knob until it reaches the point the current setting is already at before you actually hear a change. While relative means as soon as you start turning the encoder, a change will happen and the parameter will jump to whatever given position the encoder is at. I'm going to leave them on absolute, and I'm going to change the CC of this first knob. Now, most synths come with something called a MIDI implementation chart in their user manual. And on this synth, I know the cutoff frequency for our first sound is on MIDI CC 74. So if I change the CC number to 74, press enter, then hold Shift and save. Now when I turn this knob, I've got control over the filter cutoff right here on the MPK. Combine this with the MPK's ARP, the ability to play both voices of the synth. You can build a decently powerful standalone setup by making your own custom mappings for whatever synth or external gear you want to control. Now, since I already mentioned the ARP, which we're going to latch, let's talk about a few other key features. So we have all the basic features we come to expect from an arpeggiator. We can change the rate. We can also change the note order. Down. We can add octaves. Let's go back up. sounds pretty cool. And you notice that I'm holding ARP and I'm pressing the keys, which are labeled above with different parameters we can change on the ARP, but also these parameters are changeable right from the screen as well, which is super handy. One more advanced feature of the ARP we have on the MPK4 is mutate. Which will create a type of variation on our already arpeggiated sequence. If I hold Shift and go to the ARP's configuration menu, which is that menu I talked about earlier, we can scroll through those options. And you can see that there's a mutate percentage, which will increase the variation amount of a given mutation. But I can also just quickly toggle that on and off. Now, we also have ARP freeze. So I'm going to hold ARP and press freeze. Not much has happened yet, but now, if I play the keys, we're actually getting the sound of the second synth voice here. Notice I'm able to play on the keys without arpeggiating these new notes while the previous ARP is still playing. That's the magic of ARP freeze. But like I said, we were hearing the second voice of the synth. That's because when we freeze the ARP, MIDI continues to be sent on channel 1 to our first voice of the synth. And if I check our ARP configuration menu in the freeze settings, freeze on or off, freeze also has its own MIDI channel, and that is set to channel 2. So that's another MIDI signal that you can customize what channel it is sent on. After you freeze the ARP, what MIDI channel will you send out on the keys? All customizable right here from the MPK4. Another really interesting feature of the MPK4's Arpeggiator is pattern mode, where we can create more interesting rhythms with the Arpeggiator. Because right now we're just hearing a standard 8th note pattern, right? Well, let's hold the ARP key, let's turn pattern mode on, and let's go to pattern edit, and now we can edit things about the rhythm of this pattern. So, we can change things like accented steps, for instance, or we can fully turn steps off. We can also change what happens when a step is turned off. Does it skip or does it just rest? And we can change the length of the pattern as well. Currently I'm on 8 steps, but we could be at a full 16 steps, utilizing the banks of the pads to create the variations. We can also change the amount of the accented notes. If you notice, some pads are red, some pads are yellow. Yellow represents accented notes. So I can increase the amount of the accent. And then we can also save this pattern to a place within our pattern bank. So if I want to save this pattern, I just press yes. Just remember, these are like rhythmic patterns, so they're still going to respond to whatever notes I play on the keyboard. And if I save multiple patterns, I can switch between them . great part about this is once I've locked in all of my customization, I can hold shift and press save, and I can save this user preset so that anytime I want to come back to this setup and utilize the MPK with my external hardware, all of that customization is saved and ready to go. So you can see that the MPK4 is a great companion for external gear using it standalone without a DAW, taking advantage of the full-size 5-pin MIDI out, the ability to custom map pads and knobs, change MIDI channels of each individual control, assign control changes and program changes, all right from the device itself. No software required, truly standalone. We've got more videos about the MPK4 here on this channel, and if you want more info about the new MPK, check out the links in the description. My name is Tetro here with Akai. Have a good one.